It's part 3. This is ISU's computer, and that's actually the system they had at ISU 360 Model 20. They had from it was there until I left in 1976. That's the mainframe, and of course there was the punch card over here, and I had to spend many times. Rochelle's dad was the DP manager of ISU at that time, and we had a flood down there at ISU, and I fixed it, and I got an attaboy for that. But that's the system I was also trained on in Pocatello. One of the things is unit record. And that machine right there, see that guy leaning over there? That's a 402. I wasn't trained on it, but I had to fix it, you know. But that was Union Pacific. They didn't have all the tape drives and everything, but it was a pickle machine, whatever. They had funny names for our IBM equipment. This is a certificate the IBM Corporation, a certificate of honor presented to Mike Saville in recognition and appreciation of 25 years of service. September 26, 1991. And of course, I retired in 1998, forced out, but I thought I'd share that with you. I came across it, and this exercise has really forced me to go back and look at a lot of this stuff. You know, it's part of the management development at IBM. They paid for the Dale Carnegie course. It's a great course, and if you haven't attended this thing, one of these Dale Carnegie courses, I don't know if they still do them, but it was an excellent course on interrelationship with people, and I attended that when I was back in Rochester as far as my development. This is just an IBM certificate of a program, but seeking excellence was part of the basic beliefs of the IBM company at that time: respect for the individual, return of shares to the shareholders, stockholders, returning profit to them, and excellence. And that was a great company, and that's all I can say, really. My experience with that company was incredible. In fact, IBM's reputation throughout the world was outstanding at that time. When the Wall Street executive took over and they stopped training us, his goal was to steal all the assets, in my opinion. So I saw the handwriting on the wall, and I always wanted a degree because IBM sent me to schools at least 30 days every year for the first 25 years. And then, so I saw the opportunity to get my degree through the University of Phoenix through the adult night program, night classes, and IBM, I was on call 24/7. And IBM management gave me that one night off, usually on Thursdays, where I could attend the 4-hour classes at the University of Phoenix building there in Salt Lake City. And boy, I'll tell you, they had some great instructors. We had from ISU, from University of Utah, from BYU, and one guy was from he was an administrative manager at the LDS Church, but he loved to teach, and I learned a lot about statistics from that guy. But after 3.5 years of night school, I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, and my average work week just for IBM was probably about 60. So, and this was about 20s, but we were empty nesters at the time, and Rochelle put up with me leaving her vacant a lot of times on weekends and meeting with the group, and also on that class on Thursday. But I'm pretty proud of that. I always wanted that. And, versus, going to school at 18, of course I was in the Air Force at 18, I had mentioned this earlier, and this is not something I'm really proud of, but on the other hand, it was the right thing to do, is that we had a speak-up program, but was done away with by this CEO, Gerstner, who was a Wall Street banker that took over IBM in 1991 through 2001 and walked away with $789 million in stock and cash after 11 years at IBM. But they were forcing hourly workers to work overtime and not pay them. And I blew the whistle, and I guess management said they had to get rid of me because I was a troublemaker, even though I was the third highest producer of billable services in the Western United States. I generated at least $500,000 worth of revenue that they normally wouldn't have received had I not had the skills that I had. But didn't make any difference. I blew the whistle, and the manager from Arizona came in and said, "I got to get rid of you." Well, anyway, I retired, didn't sign the non-compete clause, didn't take any money, walked out the door with a $60,000 pay cut, and instructed this lawyer to go ahead and file with the with the government, the federal government. And this went on for 8 years, and I probably would have won had Orrin Hatch not intervened on behalf of IBM, because his chief of staff for 2 years was the judge, the federal judge, D. Benson, on my case in Salt Lake City, and I didn't even get a jury, didn't get a trial really. He just found a summary judgment after IBM donated a lot of money to Orrin Hatch's friend there in Salt Lake City at Newmont. But that's another story. So I appealed and went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And of course, there's 8,000 appeals, and they only take 80. There was also another lawsuit in concert. It was Kathy Cooper versus IBM, representing 249 or 250,000 IBM employees in the United States to try and get our pension back. And you can see that if you Google Saville versus IBM. And they wouldn't hear it. Kennedy wouldn't hear it at Supreme Court. They just said, "No, it's okay. Go ahead and take the pension. That's just fine with us." And that's exactly what they did. And fortunately, there was something else that I did, and I'll get into that in a minute. But anyway, it was quite an experience, and I paid $80,000 and then lost. And I'd do it again if I was given the opportunity. This was me and Rochelle. I had mentioned earlier, this was taken with the CEO and president, I guess, of Thrivent, at that time, Aid Association for Lutherans in Toronto, Canada. We were both on stage as one of the top performers. IBM painted a picture of me of being the worst employee in the world, but yet I wound up to be, I think I was in the top 10 of the new hires in the United States. And that's why we were on stage. Gave me some money, and the trip up there, we took our granddaughter to Toronto and had a great time, and then went to Washington, D.C. afterwards. But anyway, Rochelle's kind of grinning. She enjoyed it. One of the things that qualified for in the top 20% of the producers at Thrivent and AEL was I was a member of the $1 Million Roundtable Code of Ethics in the insurance business. And to get this, it's pretty, you got to really work hard. It's mainly convincing people through trust to buy your product, because there's there's hundreds of guys all beating on the same door. But when people buy from you, it's because of trust. And you can see that the ethics is complete compliance with and observance of the NDRT Code of Ethics by all members serves to promote the highest quality standards of membership. These standards are beneficial to members, clients, as well as the entire life insurance-based financial services industry. MDR's Code of Ethics stimulates always price the best interest of clients above one's own direct or indirect interests, maintain the highest standard of professional competence, and give the best possible advice to clients by seeking to maintain and improve one's professional knowledge, skills, and competence. Hold in the strictest confidence and consider as privileged all business and personal information pertaining to clients' affairs. Make full and academic disclosures of all facts necessary to enable my clients to make informed decisions. Maintain personal conduct, which will reflect favorably on life insurance industry and the $1 Million Roundtable. Determine that any replacement of life insurance or financial product must be beneficial for the client, and abide by and conform to all provisions of the laws and regulations in the jurisdictions to which one does business. And So I was an MDRT qualifier all the time, I think, when I was at Thraven and AL. Kind of glad that lawyer Wright asked for me to do this, because it allowed me to look back at some of the things over my 80-year period, not 40, but 80. And it's kind of like, Grandpa, what did you do with your life? Well, this is the alliance at IBM, or the Communications Workers of America, because IBM got rid of me as an employee, but they didn't get rid of me as a stockholder. And then the appliance, IBM was a non-union shop, and I was a former manager, and to have me present this for a union was a big deal. And I was happy to do that, because it was wrong to force hourly workers to work overtime and not pay them. And the details, and I knew it, my peers kept pressuring me to do that, and I did it, but unfortunately they shot me instead of doing the right thing. So IBM shareholder meeting, April 24, 2007, Knoxville, Tennessee, offshoring proposal speech by Mike Saville, the proponent. Good morning, Sam, and this is on the shareholders' floor. Sam was Sam Palmisano, who is the CEO at that time. He took Gerstner's place. And he gave me the microphone. Mr. Saville, would you like to speak? And I said, about one of your proxies. And there was only 4 that were presented, and the Communications Workers of America presented this one to the 1.8 billion stockholders of IBM. And he gave me 5 minutes at his meeting of 100 minutes that was required on an annual basis. This was before Zoom. Good morning, Sam, IBM Board of Directors, shareholders, fellow IBMers, and ladies and gentlemen. There was about 300 people in the room, and plus it was beamed to 130 countries through closed-circuit TV. My name is Mike Saville, and I'm from Riverton, Utah. In Gerstner's book, Elephants, he wrote that people who show up at the annual shareholder meeting are social engineers, gadflies, or disgruntled employees. Well, I might fit all those categories, but I prefer to be known as a retired IBMer after 32 years who helped IBM achieve the most admired and profitable company status during the 80s, and a long-term loyal shareholder, having held my IBM stock since 1968. Offshoring or globalization is short-term cheap labor profit chasing. It is like trying to time the stock market. Another negative factor is the effect on a corporate's brand name, the long-term effects on morale of employees working in an environment of threat and intimidation, being incentivized, treating employees as commodities and not as assets. That does not promote self-actualization or innovation. In the last 5 years, the USA employee headcount has remained flat at 127,000, while IBM India has grown to 55,000, with 100,000 employees projected in India by 2010, Sam. Last year, you announced $6 billion would be spent to expand in India, the same as the total IBM research and development in the United States annually. Where did all this IT talent come from in India? I remember reading a decade ago how India had more than 1 million computer science graduates. I could not understand why there were so many when most Indian citizens could not afford a personal computer. Curiosity led me to discover that the Indian government identified IT as a national strategy to generate employment internationally, a program similar to the GI Bill after World War II. India was cranking out millions of government-sponsored IT graduates that paid off thanks to the explosion of the internet and enabled remote computer programming and support by wire. Meanwhile, in the USA, contributions from corporations dropped by 60% to IT programs in U.S. universities, with the exception of an IT school of 250 students in my hometown, North Face, now known as Newmont, where an IT curriculum costs $80,000 for a 2-year program. Many of the 125 graduates go to work for IBM and others. We, especially Orrin Hatch and his friends in the court, thank you for your contribution to our kids. But it is only 125 kids or students a year? I guess it's easier to capitalize on a country who pays for their children's education, unlike the parents of the USA who go into Hawk funding their kids' college. I want to remind you that most of the U.S. strategic defense technology comes from science and technology graduates in our U.S. universities. Where is IBM going, and where are the long-term effects on the USA of offshoring? In 1981, a McKinsey-sponsored book, Gerstner was a McKinsey employee, written by Tom Peters entitled Excellence, that complimented IBM as being the most profitable and most admired company. Shortly thereafter, IBM fell on hard times and Gerstner came to IBM to save it. Recently, Fortune magazine ranked companies in America most admired in 8 categories that included innovation, people management, social responsibility, use of corporate assets, quality of management, financial soundness, long-term investment, and quality of products and service. They listed the 10 best and the 10 worst in each category. IBM was not mentioned in any of the best top 10 categories, and fortunately was not in the worst one either. I guess that means IBM is considered mediocre at best in the eyes of the Fortune magazine. If IBM's success is hinging on innovation for the last 4 years, where is the measured success? Why is it IBM did not make the top 10 most admired in any Fortune magazine categories? Some of the questions I have is, with the explosion of hiring in India, China, Brazil, Russia, and others internationally, when is the payoff coming to the shareholders? I reviewed IBM stock performance at CV@marketwatch.com and on page 119 of the annual report, and compared to the last 4 years of 55% growth of the S&P 500 and 55% growth of the Dow, IBM stock performance during the same period was only 12% growth. The profits of offshoring has not translated into shareholder value. Gerstner, in his Elephant book, stated that 60% of IBM is owned by institutions like State Street and mutual fund managers who don't show up at these meetings. I want to point out that those institutional funds are really managed assets of grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, our children and grandchildren who have Coverdell's IRA, 401ks, 403bs, and 457s. In other words, IBM's shareholders are the American people. I think there is concern about offshoring, about IBM's commitment to the American people who are the real IBM shareholders. An article in Information Week entitled "Why IBM for India, Beijing Machines," the writer asked, "Is IBM an American company?" There is nothing new to the exploitation of human capital. Today it is known as offshoring or globalization. I wonder if India understands how long IBM will be there before moving on to cheaper labor in Vietnam or China. I received this information from Don Perry Sunday, and he says to say hi, Sam. Robert Gormley, retired IBM Senior VP and President of Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, said in an article in The Nation that the U.S. approach to globalization must be transformed to defend the national interest. If nothing changes in how globalization works, Americans will be increasingly exposed to downward pressure on incomes and living standards. Gormley wants to recreate an understanding of the corporation's obligations to society, the social perspective that flourished for a time in the last century, but is now nearly extinct. The old idea of the country, the employees, and the people who use the product. The attitude was the attitude I grew up on in IBM, Gormley explains. That's the way we thought. Good for the company, good for the people, good for the shareholders, and I hope we can get back to it. We should measure corporations by their impact on all their constituencies. I conclude with comments by a fellow named Bob McDonald entitled "Crime of the Century." He points out that treating employees poorly and taking pension dollars from them is a violation of long-term commitments. Congratulations on the recent win in the Cooper case, where the employees saw their pensions shrink by 50% and $10 billion removed from the pension fund. I wish I had written this, but I share it with you. There is a firm belief that employees are the critical factor in a company's success or failure. When employees have the ability to add value to an organization, they will be encouraged to do so when they are allowed to share in the value created. The promise of a secure retirement is one way of a company to share the value of success created by an employee's loyalty and hard work. Promises made to employees but reneged on for short-term benefit shows disrespect for those who are critical to a company's success. When you reduce or eliminate the employee's incentive to see the company succeed, the seeds for long-term failure have been planted. I think IBM has made mistakes with an employee since 1991. That does not have to continue. It was comforting to read Randy McDonald's statement on treating employees as assets. You can say it, measure it, but what about the total ethical treatment of employees as assets? I respectfully submit this proposal on offshoring and solicit your support. Thank you. Mike Saville. Locally, I belong to the Pocatello-Chubbuck Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also a member of the Rotary. And the reason I'm a member of the Rotary is because I had polio. at 9 years old. And that virus, I'll tell you, is something. There was kids of us all over, and I caught it from a passing train that flushed the toilet when I was watching a penny being smashed. And it was, in those days, they just flushed the toilet of Pullmans on the tracks, and the virus was in that water. A week later, I collapsed. My dad took me to Scott Air Force Base. They did a spinal tap and determined that I had the virus. And from there, I went by ambulance in an Air Force ambulance to the polio ward in East St. Louis, where I saw kids, in iron lungs. And they took me up, and I was just delirious. They took me up to the stairs, and I don't know how long I was there, but I do know that they were treating me with the Salk vaccine. And eventually, I got well enough to where I could stand up, and my parents were allowed to take me home. And the treatment in those days was 140-degree hot baths, because the Salk vaccine was coming out, and I was getting boosters. But my stepmom would run the water in the tub, and then she'd boil water on the stove until it was just hot enough where she couldn't keep her elbow in it, and say, "Jump in." And I quit screaming after a week, and only whimpered from there on. But for a year, that was the treatment for having polio. And Alan Alda went through the same experience. He said that it was torture that his parents enjoyed on him. I had mentioned the JCs, and it was a great organization. Like I say, they had 300 million, and this was in 1981. We held it in San Antonio, Texas, and that's where I received my my Dunnigan from California. This is the JC Creed, and actually how I got involved is Greg Anderson, the former mayor of Pocatello, asked Rochelle and I and his wife Cheryl asked us to join, and that's how we got our start in the junior chamber. I was 31, I think. And this is the creed that they say. We believe that faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life, that the brotherhood of man transcends the sovereignty of nations, that economic justice can best be won by free men through free enterprise, that government should be of laws rather than of men, that Earth's great treasure lies in human personality, and that service to humanity is the best work of life. Every meeting is ended with that JC Creed, even today. This is my senatorship. Sorry for the dark line. I'll read it to you. It says, on behalf of the JCI Senators of California, congratulations on your JCI Senatorship 32790. This is the highest honor which can be bestowed upon an individual member by his local, and has been given for outstanding service to the JC organization. Of 2 million, this is something that your peers have to do for you, and they have to pay the money and get the club to donate to you. And president at that time was Don Benton. And the brotherhood of man transcends the sovereignty of nations. And quite an honor, really. I think today they're up to 50, and this was in 1982. But a lot of things have changed. But anyway, we have JCI Senator meetings, and we're all mentors for the JCs if we can possibly help them. That's what we do, plus community service. In my words, at Idaho State University, they asked me if I wanted to give an oral history of my experience at ISU. And this is what I did, what I said, and they published it. Of course, I never graduated from there. But I had 10-year affiliation in the fact that I maintained that computer for the students, including a flood that happened when the sewer backed up. This is taken from the book, and of course, it's the black line is from the cover. But Country Over Party, that's when I, as I had mentioned earlier, we did the voter registration booth up at the Eastern Idaho State Fair from 2015 through 2024, 9 years. And that's my shirt. It's Country Over Party. And this is what I said. Michael L. Mike Saville. My educational journey has been an incredible one, from attending night school with Chick Bilyeu on communications to obtaining the BSBA in business management from the University of Phoenix. I've been able to gain wealth of knowledge and experience. I was even recognized as an outstanding young man of America in 79 and 81, joining the ranks of Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, Elvis Presley, and Howard Hughes. My time at ISU was especially meaningful. I was responsible for the ISU computer system for 10 years, and I was able to build strong interpersonal relationships with the people there. I also encouraged those who were afraid to leave the university and get a job. One guy had been there for 10 years. He says, when are you going to get a job? You got a physics degree. You got, he's 30 years old. I was able to take advantage of the CEWT program to improve my gun safety and attend the financial update. My time in the Air Force and at the University of Maryland also helped me to grow and develop. I was trained to fix a bomber loaded with nuclear bombs during the Cuban Missile Crisis and Vietnam War. I also spent a year and a half of my 3 years in Germany, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a member of the Vietnam Veterans of America, thanking me to being a life member of the organization. You can only be a life member because a lot of us aren't around anymore. We're proud that the Vietnam Veterans of America is one of the most respected veteran service organizations, the sole organization devoted exclusively to the issues of Vietnam-era veterans and their families. One thing that you'll run into, and I've run into this, is guys will say, well, unless you get your feet on the ground inside, inside the hooch and all that stuff, in Vietnam. And they were primarily the 600,000 draftees that did this, but there was over, they were 18-month, and it was a terrible war. There's no question in my mind. It was an awful war. But also remind everybody that it was 2.7 million rotated in and out and were serving at that time during the 20 years from 1955 to 1975. And people rotated in and out. Everybody was in that conflict during that period of time. Not only the draftees, the 18-month draftees that sadly were, it was just sad. But and like, for example, the F-105 aircraft, the bomber that once the Minuteman became available, they went to Vietnam and Thailand, and 300 of them were shot down. We're all in the game. So everybody that was in the military overseas and stateside, and I'm talking about the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Coast Guard, they were all part of the Vietnam era during that period of time. Not just the guys that were, had the boots on the ground inside the jungles. When I joined my father in the Air Force in Illinois, and then lived in 6 different communities between the ages of 9 and 18 and around military bases, and traveling, and your dad's on top secret missions, and you're really in the military. But it also taught me, because we traveled around a lot, that there's a lot of things to see, and I did as a kid, and especially in Panama and just traveling. And Dad liked to travel; he really did. We would when I was back in Illinois, we would travel in the summertime for a month or a couple of weeks at least to Pocatello to see his mom and my grandma and go fishing. So over the years, when I got into the Air Force, I started traveling in Europe because, when you're there for 36 months and no trips home, no phone calls home, and $73 a month, I had 3 jobs. Working at the education center plus the TV station, and my regular job at the Air Force, I traveled, and it was usually grab the, if I had some free time or leave time, just grab the blanket and the pillow, and off I'd go on that 1956 Volkswagen. And I visited 18 countries. You learn a lot that way. I'm not talking, no supervision, you're by yourself. And most of the time, guys couldn't go. And And I really believe what Mark Twain said. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth in all one's lifetime. Mark Twain. 30 countries visited. That's how many, Rochelle and I, we've gone to, 16 countries, I guess, together through, and this is not on business. No, this is all on vacation, paid for by me and her, and in other words, it wasn't a job. It was just a vacation. Some examples. The picture on the top is at Spangdahlem. Actually, we went on a tour with Grand Circle Tour, and we met a warrant officer, and he got us on the base. And what a change in 2004, from 1966 to 2004, of course, another street, it just changed, and that's a picture. And you can see the comments, and that's, moms, you need to know that. It says, safety first, your mom cares, and that's the base commander. And really, there's a lot of money invested in, and I figure at least $1 million in my education at the Air Force. Paid to learn how to fix that bomber. There's me and Rochelle at the same time in Innsbruck, Austria, and I was there in October and have a picture of the same spot. Of course, that was 2004. Gosh, time flies, 21 years ago. Okay, there's Cairns, Australia. We learned how to, at the top there, we learned how to throw a spear. And that's on a boat. That's at Sydney Harbor. That's Rochelle. There's the remarkable mountains in New Zealand on our way to Milford Sound, I think. Gosh, incredible. Reminded me of the Rockies. What a beautiful place New Zealand is. Here's our trip to Russia in 2012. This was, Putin was elected to his third term in 2011, and this was in St. Petersburg. And that's where Nicholas, I think, is buried. Him and his family that were murdered by the communists. And there's the Kremlin. And we had 3 days there, 21 days. It was an incredible trip. And I'll share with you one thing, is that at that time the ruble was 33 to the dollar. As soon as Putin, the next year in 2014, invaded Ukraine with his little green men, the ruble fell from 33 to a dollar to 77 to the dollar. And then he raised the visa prices, and there was 6 different American tourist organizations that traveled from St. Petersburg down the Volga River to Moscow, and they all shut down because they just couldn't compete with other areas to visit. And as a result of that, Putin basically locked the country down. We saw a lot of Chevys and Fords, and the price of computers were 30% higher than the United States. Cars were 30% higher, but after it devaluated, it really caused the people can't afford American stuff. So he basically locked the country down, and that's who Putin is. It's a sad thing because we met a family there, and the people were great. But it's not, it's awful what happened there. So, but you learn things when you travel like that. But that's my story for Russia. Oh yeah, and the guy, one of the things when we crossed the border, they said, don't look at the border, keep your eyes down. And I saw people, and most of the people there in Russia have blue eyes like mine. And I'd catch somebody, maybe just anybody, pretty girls, and if if you made eye contact, they looked the other way. They didn't. They a lot of fear. And some guy as I was trying to find a hat that had USSR on it, all I could find was the NFL, New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox, LA Raiders. And a fellow, as I was going back to the boat, waiting for the light to change, big tall guy, looked down at me and he says, "You're an American, aren't you?" In perfect Johnny Carson English. And I said, "Yes, I am. Do you need any help?" I said, "No, I don't think so." And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, the light changed, "Gotta go." I went back to the boat. In other words, I think, they know who you are. And they also know that I had a problem with IBM at that time. And they knew a lot about you. And I think he was following me, but I can't prove anything. Well, here Rochelle and I are in China. This is right outside of Beijing on the Great Wall of China in 2015. That was another trip we took with the Grand Circle Tour. There was 28 of us in that trip, and one gal was 87 years old, and she'd been to all the continents of the world, and she wanted to make it to the Great Wall, and we helped her get there. This is in Shanghai. And that's quite a city. It really is incredible. If you get a chance, go to China. Don't go on a business trip. Go on your own. It stopped off in Japan, and there we are at Mount Fuji. Here we are at the Forbidden City. All this in 2015. That's really, China. They one of the parts of the tour was going to a 4th grade class, and these kids met us, and we went into, it looked like a classroom like I had at Emerson Elementary School, initials on the desks, and the walls lined with alphabets and other things. And we noticed that the kids could understand us, and they sang the Yellow Rose of Texas to us. And the little girls came up and says, "Hi, my name is Sally, what's yours?" They don't have it, they can't speak it very well, but they understood everything we were saying. Because in China, they teach their children 2 languages, Mandarin and English. And the reason they teach English is because all the manuals in the world, technical manuals, are written in English. And the international language of trade is English. As an engineer on the Union Pacific, and we went on this bullet train and took this picture. It's an incredible thing. The Chinese, over a 10-year period, built 15,000 miles of this train. And you could go 200 miles for about $35, and it would cost $35. And if you were to drive it, it cost $165, or if you went by bus. And there's the speed, 309 kilometers or 180 miles an hour. It's incredible what they've done. And we don't have one train in the United States. And in fact, Barack Obama, when he was president, he gave, I think it was $800 million to run a high-speed train from Milwaukee to Chicago. And the governor, who's a Republican, turned down the money. Turned down that money that could provided jobs, and that was it, $800 million. And he was told that by Charles Koch, who was his mentor, I guess. Hey, there's Hong Kong. I haven't finished up the tour. And in fact, I'm heading back. I want to see Vietnam, and that's part of my bucket list as the next trip. So, finishing up here, we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary on April 15th. This was in a journal in 2018. Had to pay for it, I think $50 or something. But there we are in Hawaii, and took the kids over there. And there we were as newlyweds. Faith Lutheran in Pocatello. And we've been married 57 years now, or is it 58? 57. Okay, I guess we're an anomaly. I'll finish this thing up with a letter from Senator Risch, congratulating me on my 50th wedding anniversary on April 18th, 2018. Your dedication and commitment to one another is remarkable. As you reflect on all the years spent together, the changes and accomplishments you have witnessed, and the growth you have experienced, please know your example has inspired many. Your steadfast love and unity, commitment, and honor, as well as faithfulness and respect, have built a commendable legacy which will pass on through your family for generations to come. Vicki and I wish you the very best as you celebrate the wonderful years you have enjoyed together. James E. Risch. He's 82 years old and he wants to run another 6 years in that Senate. He's been in politics for 47 years and worth $109 million. How does a guy do that? Well, I know how he does it, but I won't get into that. But anyway, nice letter from Senator Risch. And that's it. I hope this answers all the interrogatories. At least yes, this is it. And we'll go from there. Mr. Wright, this is what you requested, and maybe you got more than you wanted, but gave me the opportunity to really reflect on my experience. And here again, you probably have this much experience, and I got this much experience.